I love a good comeback story. And today's guest has an incredible story of getting her butt kicked, being in a hellhole with health, with chronic disease, with symptoms that were never ending, and dragging and pulling herself out of pain and into purpose. And, as I was preparing for this interview, I was reminded of Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Gosh, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. He may have been playing for the Buccaneers, I don't remember, but basically it was something like, forgive me, football fans, because this is not perfect. It was something like he's down 35 points at halftime. It's impossible to come back. I'm falling asleep. People are turning the TV off. But this dude comes out gunslinging in the second half, wins the Super Bowl, and that's what I feel like Simona has done. She's we just said pain to purpose. She took her struggles, learned, crawled out of that hellhole, and is now helping other people. And I am so excited for you guys to hear her story. Simona, welcome to the Rooted. I don't even remember my podcast. The podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, and I love that intro. I'm very flattered to be compared to Tom Brady there.
You're the Tom Brady of the emotion world. I think before we were logging on, I said you're the queen of the emotions because you're able to meet all the emotions and move towards them. We're certainly gonna unpack that later. And as I'm sitting here, I remember this is the Rooted Conversations podcast.
Mhm.
Sometimes we get excited when we have friends on,
Yeah.
but where I want to start is, I found your work through Dr. Claire Weeks and her book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves. I always recommend that to my clients who have a ton of symptoms. They're shut down and got a lot of fatigue. Maybe it's a lot of anxiety, symptoms that shift and change, and we can put labels on them, and we could really work hard to try to figure out what's going on. And when I got this book, I learned about sensitization. I learned that it's a product of a nervous system that's been dysregulated, that's overloaded, that's overwhelmed. And it's like these symptoms are normal. And instead of chasing and trying to figure out, it's more about how can we meet them, learn that they're not as scary as we think they are. And it really changed my life. So I'd love to start by kind of tell us what sensitization is,
Yeah.
and then, give us the worst of your story and how, and like some of the worst examples, some of the worst stories you can think of, and how you started to heal from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sensitization, the discovery of the word sensitization for me too changed everything in my journey. So, sensitization was kind of this like catch-all bucket of, all of, this experience of having the world be so loud and bright and all the smells and all the sensitivities and all the symptoms and also the way that I was noticing my body and the way that I was, becoming obsessed with every, symptom and every little feeling or every heartbeat. Um, so sensitization really is what happens in our system when we are washed over and over again with adrenaline. It's our system becomes very sensitive and sensitized, and we begin to see through this lens of sensitivity and complete overwhelm, where, something that might feel like a 1% annoyance becomes a 1,000,000% annoyance that is actually like rippling and shaking our body when we're in that sensitized state. So sensitization, like you said, was kind of coined by Dr. Claire Weeks, who was way ahead of her time and is just such an incredible woman and with such incredible knowledge. And the way we stay in sensitization is that we are trying to chronically fix it. So we're trying to get out of it, or we become really bewildered by it and we keep trying to figure out why it's happening. So fixing it and trying to figure out why drives more sensitization. And so we'll talk as we go along. I'll share a bit more about my story, but we'll talk about, what do we do to get out of sensitization once we realize that we're in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the beginning it's like she goes through the book and she lays out all of these symptoms. And I remember I can already feel emotion coming up, like thinking about it. Like I remember reading those symptoms and I could go, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Like everything's turned up to, in 1 out of 10, it's 100. But what it did for me is it kind of normalized, like, okay, I'm not going to die from these symptoms. I've likely experienced the worst of it. And it's like, understand neuroplasticity. I understand nervous system dysregulation. She calls it nervous breakdown in the book.
Yep.
I think that was a term that was like coined for women in her time.
Yep.
Some mom would say growing up, I'm having a nervous breakdown.
Yep.
But it's like some of that volume can turn down when we realize we're not going to die and that other people are experiencing this. I felt like a needle in a haystack.
Mhm.
And the more we can show our nervous system that it's safe, it seems like the less grip that it has on us.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's exactly right. Like, one, knowing that we're not alone with the level of sensitization and symptoms, and that includes the thoughts and the intrusive images and intrusive thoughts and all of that. That's often like the loneliest part for people because people are like, there's no way anyone else is having this.
Yeah.
Um, and so knowing we're not alone and also knowing that there is a way out, there is hope, and learning how to begin to implement that so we're not feeding into the cycle of more adrenaline, which of course equals more sensitization.
And I wrote that little equation down, trying to fix it and plus trying to figure out why equals more sensitization. And that's my clients. These are guys that and women, that have I'm thinking of like first responders, special forces, professional athletes, where they feel like their body has let them down. They pride maybe their perception of themselves is that they're strong. They are strong people,
Yeah.
and their body like shut down on 'em, and they feel like they're weak, and it's they're often the ones that are trying to they're very educated, they're smart, they want to learn, and they're trying everything to fix it. Is it the gut, is it a supplement, is it this or that? And the sad thing is that if you're ill, if you're have a dis-ease in your body, everybody wants to sell you something, and that information can just suck us in. And it's like, it's the next thing, it's the next thing. And I think for me, I guess the label kind of helps, but it's like it kind of washes away all the what ifs.
Mm.
And it's just, if we can come back to this is a sensitized nervous system, I don't have to fix this. And there's a lot of opportunity to slow down and meet some of that stuff, which I know you're a pro at.
Yeah. Yep, I became a pro accidentally. Yeah, yeah, so I'll share a little bit of my story. Um, I won't go into like a ton from the past, but I'll say, looking back since I've been through the journey, looking back, I can see that I was kind of born in a bit of a sensitized state. And, I had those I was a sensitive kid. I was like a really perceptive kid. And I had these little fears ever since I was small. I remember being like, someone lives in the basement and like run up the stairs and run away and like really vivid imagination. But for the most part, it was like, oh, that would come up and it would be normal and whatever. Um, and then through my life, I had a lot of trauma. So I have an ACE score of 10, which is like the most that you can have, although that score is, it misses some bigger things that happen in the world, but it is a good indicator in terms of, I had a difficult childhood with a lot of challenging things that came into it. And, like most people who live through trauma, it's like you don't know you're even living in it because it's your life. And
Mhm.
so you've just adapted to it and you've frozen certain parts of yourself and you're just surviving and you're doing life. And so for me, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I have a brother who's schizophrenic. And I left home really early when I was 13 and was kind of unhoused from 13 to 21, just traveling and homeless sometimes and finding my way. And so within that section of my life, like a lot of really difficult things and really traumatizing things happened, but there was no downtime to process it. So it just kind of, yeah.
There was one thing you used that I read where it just popped in my head is like, you mentioned you had a vivid imagination. And I remember the place where you left home early and were homeless. And it said it's almost like, did that vivid imagination help during that? How did that, I don't know if it helped, but how did it come into play during that time? And it sounds like you were not able to slow down. Did that, did those two things go together at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think, I mean, it's hard to know like chicken or egg, what happens, but I do think for me, you know, there was this, well, there was two things. One, I always had this very deep sense of connection with life.
Mhm.
Since I was really small, I remember it just really clearly feeling connected to something bigger than me. Sometimes that actually is a bit of a trauma response, and it's also a maybe blessing, too. So that piece was there for me for sure. And then I think, the vivid imagination and the creativity absolutely allowed me to look at my situation with eyes of adventure
That's what it
and
was. Yeah.
curiosity and interest, and that was true too. It's like that actually was a part of it, and there was so much blessing in it, but some of what I was skipping was feeling the terror of being alone at a young age and some of the other things. So that got pushed down, and then, this creative mind was like, "Whoa, this is amazing and an adventure, and look at what I can do here."
And how useful and how much sense does that make as a protective mechanism in that situation?
Totally. It was a blessing, and it made me survive.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then when I was around 21, I finally I was in a relationship and settled into a place, and, life was a little bit more simple for me. And then right away I got sick, which
So you got some safety, you're doing better, and now the nervous system goes, "Hey, here's this stuff that we need to talk about."
yeah, yeah. And back then I had no idea. That was, it was like 20 something years ago. And so people were not talking about the nervous system in the same way then. But I still, because when I was younger, I was very kind of like natural leaning and had been part of a lot of different spiritual communities. So I went this kind of natural route, and I was quite sick with now what we would call like POTS and dysautonomia and, you know, like complex PTSD, all of those symptoms. But I treated them through naturopathic medicine. So it was like parasite cleanses and heavy metal detoxes and all of these types of things that felt true and resonant to me. And, all the tests showed different things. And of course, now looking back, what was also happening is that I was coming into the presence of people who were showing care for me. And I was entering into communities where I was able to heal. And so it's like there was a few things happening at once, but it was a period of 3 years, and I was able to come out of it and then jumped into trying to, make a life for myself. And for me, that looked a lot like perfectionism and striving and trying to show, I'm not this homeless person, or I'm not from this like background. I'm worthy. And so I tried to show that through being a workaholic,
Yeah.
frankly, and trying to get security and money, um, and follow, my values. I worked in the organic and natural food world. So it was like I had still this like activism and this way of showing up, but with so much striving and perfectionism underneath it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you had a tumultuous childhood. You
Yeah.
left home. we had a protective strategy that made this more of an adventure. We weren't unpacking all the scary stuff that it takes to leave home and
Yep.
making that decision. And we get in a relationship, we get some safety, and all the stuff starts to erupt. So you go to your roots, you do natural your cleanses, it sounds like, and detoxes, and
All of them.
chasing lab numbers and looking at all this. And it sounds like there's some improvement, and it's hard to really say chicken or the egg. Was it the healthy, safe community that you're in there and getting met, getting needs met, and feeling more safe there, or was it the detox and getting the parasites out? Like, it was kind of a who knows. So when did you go into the corporate world? I know you had a lot of success with that,
Yeah.
and then what?
Yeah. So then, I am the CEO of a infant formula company for North America. It's a global company. It's a, billion-euro company. I have a family. I'm married. I have two kids. And so on paper, I did it, right? I came from this really rough situation and with really nothing, and doing all of this myself and not a lot of education, and just really working and figuring out and doing. It's like, okay, I did it. I did the thing that people want, right? And then of course it, wasn't fulfilling. I was exhausted. I was leading um in, you know, from my trauma. And so COVID came around. I was already had an experience actually 3 years before I had the big perfect storm. I went to Peru. I did a plant medicine ceremony, and in that ceremony, I had a great experience. And then later, in the ceremonies, I had a really difficult experience where I think like a whole bunch of my trauma was just unfrozen
Mhm.
at once.
Okay.
Um, and it really shook me up. So that was kind of like 3 years before my perfect storm. There was this kind of shaking up that happened.
Mhm.
And after that, actually, I found Smart Body, Smart Mind, and I did that program, and it was hugely supportive for me, really, really helpful. Um, and I still didn't fully, this journey is so complex because we just keep learning as we go. And so, and then COVID came around. Had this thing that happened with my eye. I might have had COVID in the early days, and this might have been a side effect of it. I took a antibiotic and like within a couple of hours had a huge allergic reaction to it. I got hives, and then I just couldn't sleep. And then one day turned into 2 days of not sleeping, turned into 3 days of not sleeping. Um, and then it was just like my body broke. It was just my brain was broken, my body was broken, everything. It, where there used to be like a layer between me and the world, all of a sudden it was like I could feel and see and sense and smell and hear everything as if I had no skin on my body.
So you're just like super raw.
So raw, not sleeping, filled with an anxiety that only people who have been through this journey understand. It's like, it's like a 1,000 out of 10 level of just
And
pure,
it doesn't turn off.
does not turn off ever. And it's like relentless rumination and this feeling, this like acute feeling for me, I remember of just like as if I'm just like floating in space, untethered, filled with terror.
Like underwater kind of feeling.
Yeah, for kind of underwater, but for me, it was kind of like empty.
Out in space.
Yeah. And just never like total, just completely alone, really was like the root of it. But so that those 3 days, ended up turning into, a year and a half long journey, more like several year journey. But the symptoms just got worse and worse. So what started as insomnia and anxiety became dysautonomia. My whole nervous system just really, I remember like standing up and it was like my vestibular system was like sideways. So it's like I'm standing up, but I'm seeing the world sideways. And then the chronic pain started. I couldn't walk on one of my feet. I couldn't turn my head, my back. Um, oh my gosh, like all I could eat like maybe six foods. I was scared of
Oh yeah.
ever
Oh yeah.
just
I get it.
but yeah, the whole thing. And my body, I had tachycardia too. So one of the early symptoms was my heart rate resting. I remember one day just taking it and it was like 160. And I had an aura ring at that time too. And my heart rate variability was, oh my God, it was like, I think it was 13.
13. Wow.
And I just took it off because I was like, this is not going to help me. Like this, because I told someone and they're like, oh my God, that's like, it's like you're dead.
Thank you. That's so helpful right now.
I know. And I was like, great. Yeah. 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 And so yeah, so there was all these things happening and it was so dysregulating. I had two kids. I have two kids.
Oh my God, I didn't realize you had two kids during this.
Yeah, and I was running this company and I had never taken any time off. Was like the earner for our household. So it was like the stakes were so high for me. I never expected to be in a situation and I could not stop working. It just wasn't financially feasible. So
And how much are you sleeping at this time, if I remember your story correctly?
yeah, so at the beginning I was kind of in and out. There was like some okay moments. And then about 3 months into the like sensitization dysregulation state, I stopped sleeping and I was sleeping sometimes maybe 30 minutes a night, sometimes like a couple days with no sleeping. Um, it was unbelievable. I it's hard to even like I remember it and I remember what it felt like. But I look back sometimes and I'm like, how did I survive that? And it was really, really, really tough. Yeah.
Wow. So again, so many things that I can. That's one of the reasons I reached out. I started hearing your story. I'm like, oh my God, this woman is just like me. It seems like there's a pattern to those of us that have been through the ringer that there is this moment when our unfrozen stuff, when things happen too fast, too soon.
Yep.
So a system that's not ready, and it's kind of, it really kind of I'm tempted to ask about plant medicine because I get asked about it so much. It's benefited me. Mushrooms have typically been the things that I've done. I've not done like an ayahuasca and ibogaine, like some of the third world country stuff. But I get a lot of questions about it, and I guess I'm curious going through this. It sounds like there's a good part of it, and then maybe there's another day or two, and then all this stuff comes out and it's too much for your system. And like you said, it's like getting your skin ripped off,
Yeah.
and you're feeling, it's like you're coming out of water for the first time. That's my analogy for being unfrozen, is like we've been held underwater, and so you're coming out of the water, but it's not this slow and titrated way that your system is slowly building capacity for. It's like rip the rug out from under you and sink or swim. And
Yeah.
so, and you had to do that with raising kids, being the breadwinner, being a CEO, like, and now you have all of this sensation to deal with. And I'm just curious, like, what's your 2 cents on a a first world, an American going, or Canadian going and doing some of these plant medicines, because they are very tempting and there's a lot of good stories that we hear from.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, when I look back now, like it was perfect. You
Mhm.
know, Peru is beautiful. The people there are beautiful. The community, it's funny. It's like we use these words like first world or third world or whatever. And to me, I'm like, that's the world I want to live in.
Yeah, yeah.
Like beautiful community and the way like the generosity of spirit and the beauty and the kindness and the connection and there was so much goodness and this will be familiar to you too, where it was not held in a trauma informed way. I I had done decades of work and decades of therapy and I had been through all this like shamanic training and I still didn't really there was things that I just didn't understand and so everything that came up in me, you know, it was it was like I believed it in this moment, instead of understanding that it was all past frozen stuff and frozen thoughts and frozen experiences. And so when it came up for me, and I think this is what happens for a lot of us, it's like we believe it in this moment that we're feeling this way, and there's no separation between what's happening and like the witness self or like the adult self being able to say, like, this is old and like let's let it pass through. For me it was like, everything that came up in that ceremony I related to it as if it was happening right now and it was true. So an example, a small example, would be in one part of the ceremony I was stuck in this kind of infinity suffering loop, and I could see it and feel it, and it was so scary, and I thought it meant something about reality. Um, and of course, later I realized, like, no, that's just what it felt like when I was a child. Yeah, and so it took me and a lot of the work I do actually now is with people who have done plant medicine ceremonies and gone to a really dark place,
Mhm.
or had a really dark or difficult journey, and to help them start to relate to it differently in terms of all you were seeing was pain that was already in your body, just looking to be processed.
We haven't been taught to witness that from the adult consciousness, from the witness, and we believe we are that. So it sounds like you're going into this and you think you're getting these downloads or this wisdom about your life, but it's these really hard experiences that you weren't able, you have the capacity to feel at some point. So we buried it and now it's coming up. And instead of like thanking it and waving it goodbye and releasing it, you're clutching to it, thinking like, oh my God, what does this mean?
Yes, exactly. It's like we're looking kind of outward, when it really what I believe happens in these ceremonies, I mean, a lot happens in these ceremonies. One of the things is that we're kind of swimming in our own nervous system.
Mm.
And what we're experiencing comes through symbol, comes through sensation, comes through song, comes through imagery. And it shows us parts of our shadow and it shows us parts of our trauma and it shows us, things and and then it comes through our minds and then we analyze it through our minds and often that leads us astray as opposed to just having the capacity and, having done nervous system work where you could go and be like, okay, I see that and let me go to sensation, let me surrender and allow it to pass through. I didn't have that. I just like clenched against it.
You were white knuckling it.
Yeah.
Did
I
you
was
know, was there also, I'm wondering if I'm hearing this correctly. It sounds like there was a lack of trauma informed help and that maybe the container was not set up or there wasn't a foundation that prepared you for this, is what you're saying?
Yep. Yeah, it was before it was, it was a while ago, so it wasn't so popular in the moment and and I also, I don't think I was aware of the level of trauma
Oh,
in
how
my
could you be? You know?
too. So I was kind of like, oh, well, I know I have a brother who's schizophrenic, so I should be careful with this. And I know I've had a hard life, but I didn't really understand what complex trauma is or how it shows up again later. And so, and the facilitators certainly did not. They just didn't have that experience. So I was not held and supported, which of course, again, is a part of my story. It's like terrible, chaotic things happen and I'm not held and supported. Here I am again, replaying this and feeling completely alone. And so it was like a perfect mirror of what was inside me, but I did not have the capacity to meet it at all in that moment.
That makes so much sense to me as well as someone who has complex trauma, who had a lot of plant medicine journeys in college and things like that. I was on
Yeah.
tour with Widespread Panic selling mushroom chocolates and t-shirts, and I was doing a lot of those. And like I remember going to my first, I think I did EMDR as my first like trauma. We built up to it for like 6 months. And I remember being in it and I'm like, this feels like what it feels like to be in a psychedelic experience. And she's like,
Mm.
oh, like, and because my trauma was coming up in these experiences, I didn't know what that meant. It was always scary. I knew I always had to work through something.
Mhm.
And kind of tying into something we're going to talk about later, she goes, what do you do? And I'm like, I dance. And she said, like, how do you work with that intensity when you feel it? And I'm like, I dance. And she goes, do you want to
Yeah.
dance now? I'm like, yeah, I want to dance.
Oh, I love it.
And I will also say that I still now I like to microdose every now and then. I don't really like I can't imagine doing a bigger dose. It just where I'm at in my process,
Mhm.
it feels like too much.
Mhm.
But the microdosing now is so nice. It's
Yeah.
so loving. It's so silly.
Mhm.
There's not this like terror that comes up, and I think that speaks to um, the work that I've been through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, for me, that catalyst that kicked me into that bigger perfect storm, in hindsight, of course, I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. And if I hadn't have had that and then found Smart Body, Smart Mind and done some of that work and in between, I did a lot of somatic experiencing, and then I still had a perfect storm because I think really that perfect storm was just the second wave of trauma that had to come out eventually.
Yeah.
And here was this opportunity where it's COVID, I'm gonna have to work from home. If this is going to come out at any moment of my life, well, this probably was the right moment for me. And those tools gave me some capacity, and all the hospitals were closed. So when it happened too, I was like, I should go to the hospital. I should. And in Canada, everything was closed. So it was like, no, like you're here with this. And I'm going to have to figure this out. And I was really lucky. I had a naturopathic doctor and she was like, "Okay, listen, like I see what you're saying. I hear you. There's a million things like we could test you for mold. We could, like mold, Lyme. You'll probably be positive for all of it, but you have a nervous system like
Oh my gosh. That's what an amazing doctor. I can't imagine. I have a functional medicine doctor like that too. And so I get
yeah.
how much of a blessing that is because she could put you through the ringer and poke you and prod you and supplements and protocols just made me worse at that time.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, because I looked to my past. I was like, I guess it helped me then. But in this moment, I think because I had all the histamine stuff and all this stuff happening, I couldn't even take one supplement, let alone eat anything. I tried to take sleeping medication. I was given benzos and I had never even taken a prescription really ever in my life for anything. Tried to take these things, they just made everything worse, tried to take CBD oil, made everything worse. And so, yeah, it was just like, listen, you need to try these neuroplasticity programs. And there was all of, I don't know what it was in me, but I'm really grateful for it, where there was a willingness. And I felt so horrible. And I looked at my kids and I really was like, I cannot I do not want my kids to have the same sort of life that I did, where like a mom that just is not available or can't function or can't do this. So there was this like, no matter what it takes, I am going to figure this out and I'm going to be a mom to these kids. And so if it's this bizarre neuroplasticity program that makes no sense to me, I'm going to do it and see what happens.
Yeah, it's like to get to the dance, you cannot accept what you are feeling. And when you get to the dance, you got to accept how you're feeling. talk a little bit about I think it's a great thing to talk about because we're talking about Claire Weeks, and it's
Yeah.
like it's it's accept. What are the first one? I know it's accept, or what is it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna say it wrong, but I'm gonna give like the gist of it.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's this idea of like acceptance,
yeah,
and
like,
then there's this big piece of allowing, and then this floating
yeah,
with the odd and unusual sensations. And like, let me tell you, obviously, too, when you're sensitized for a long period, and for me, then I added on not sleeping, you know, and I had all the physical symptoms, they were horrible. But about even after I had started my neuroplasticity journey and doing all these like brain retraining rounds, and actually all of that, I just kept getting worse and worse. And like I got better in some ways with capacity, but now, with this wellness hat that I can look back on, I was making more capacity and my body was like, okay, like just keep releasing the trauma, like just keep letting it go. And about 6 months in, I got these like relentless intrusive thoughts. They were horrible, and like images, like violent images, just like looping on things. It was like my brain just was not working properly. And it was so, for me, that was like a huge part. And there was so much shame and so much like, oh my gosh, am I crazy? Is this like, is this what happens before people become schizophrenic? And that, of course, creates more adrenaline and more sensitization. And then there was like the depersonalization, derealization. And so all of it for me, even when I started the work, it didn't get better for me. It got worse. And I like, coming up to this peak moment of really feeling, yeah, just having this mind that was just like all this stuff coming up all the time, and this body with the heart rate, and all of the sensitivities and all the histamine and all of the stuff. And yeah, it was like really, really, really difficult. And then like you said, I had to learn. I had it was a journey. I had to learn to eventually just be like, this is how it is for me right now.
yeah,
And horrible. And running away from this and being terrified and thinking of these like me homeless under a bridge and all these scary thoughts that were coming to mind, and that I'm going to ruin my kids' lives and blah, blah, blah. None of this is helping me. But what's going to help me is just like, this is what's happening for me, and how can I start to tend to it?
yeah. And then like a couple of things that I wrote down with that is that people need to know and understand that's so common with this work. It's gonna get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
That's so common, especially if you come in like we did. It sounds like with maybe some idea. I mean, I was reading The Body Keeps the Score and got to the childhood trauma part and went, "How dare you even consider your childhood was abusive or whatever?" And I went right past that chapter. Uh,
Yeah.
and so there's an awareness, and then there's an awakening, and that awakening is not always so pleasant. Uh, it's the all the things that we've suppressed because we didn't have the capacity to deal with the intensity. Now the big scary things are coming up,
Yep.
and what I love about Claire Weeks is I had the same exact experience. Things got worse. I built a lot of capacity, and it felt like, when is this gonna get any better? And I love Claire Weeks's, acceptance and allowing, because what it does, this really spoke to me, is hey, you got fear from the thing that happened whenever it happened, and that's valid and that makes sense. And now we're adding a secondary fear to that is driving and bathing us in adrenaline and cortisol, and that's
Yeah.
actually keeping us stuck. So the thing that happened 10 years ago, the car accident, the abuse, whatever that may be, yeah, that's terrible. But it's like it's living here in our system now, and it is what is causing all these symptoms. And dysregulation in the nervous system just means that we're stuck. we're likely overloaded and overwhelmed. And if we can even take that secondary fear and turn the dial down a little bit, it's amazing what that can do. Like, to give the listeners an idea, I remember reading this book on the way to Hawaii, and I had all these things that I wanted to avoid. I remember I was fasting all the way to Hawaii so
Yeah.
I could like not mess up my stomach.
Yeah.
And I landed in California and I'm reading all these symptoms. They're all me. And it's kind of this like fake it till you make it. It's almost like, okay, you're gonna sit in this fire of discomfort, but it can't burn you, and you gotta know that. And I used that trip. I remember getting to the airport and going, you know what? I'm gonna have that beer with my wife that I'm
Yeah.
terrified of. And I just kept doing stuff like that while I was on vacation. Just okay, we're terrified. We're gonna go up this mountain. We're terrified. We're gonna hang out by the pool today. And the more I just stood there and looked at it, the less it. It's the. I remember coming out of that that trip, and I'm like, what is it about Hawaii that makes me feel so good? And it's because I turn down that secondary fear. I refuse to, and it's a journey, like you said. It's not like overnight I'm fixed. I'm still working on this stuff, but it's so much better than it was. And I just think that secondary fear is such a big part of it.
Oh my gosh, it's a huge part. And, that is the piece that keeps us in the sensitization. It's really, in my work, I use this river analogy all the time. And it's by the time we're aware of these different things that are floating up, really they're already floating down the river. Our only job is to not run in front of them and stop them and try to analyze it and figure it out and be terrified of it. It's like, just let it float down the river, and like I said at, the beginning of the journey, there was this crossover. So I believed what was floating up was happening now. And so
Mhm.
that was distorting my perception of life and everything. And eventually what I realized is it's both, part of what happens with trauma is in the memory, this felt sense, gets stored in one section, and then like the sound and the smell over here, and then like the thoughts we were having when we froze in that moment. And so part of what happens when we create this capacity and all the balls start to float up, for me at least, and with the people that I work with, is I noticed it's not just the sensation that comes up, but it's the nervous system state and the thoughts of that moment. So
Mm,
thoughts like, I'm going to die if I do this, or this is too much, or I want to die, or, whatever. It can be so many versions of that. And so a big thing that I work with people is like, it's possible that those thoughts are part of that frozen moment, and
mm.
we don't need to tend to them, and we can let them just float down the river and, tend to this body and be here and find your ground and your steadiness, but we don't need to jump in front, and we can allow those to continue to move. And those may be thoughts of that frozen moment and actually not relevant to this current moment where you do have more capacity and you do have community or you do have someone you can reach out to.
And that's why it's so important. I mean, you can do so much on your own, and thank God for courses like your community that you have that we're going to be talking about. It certainly helped me a ton. And I think about Irene and Smart Body, Smart Mind. Doing that stuff at home is great, and um, that can only get you so far because you can only see so much, and it really takes a trained, regulated nervous system. That is what you are paying us for. Is
Yeah.
someone that's been up that mountain, knows what the trails are like, knows what to watch out for. And when you can see that in someone else, they can see what we can. They're able to pause us, to direct us, to feel and to sense. Because what I was doing was my all or nothing perfectionism um, was just blowing past what I call the yellow light and the red light, and then ending up in jail, meaning I was just beat up and tired and
Yep.
thinking I needed more because there's something to fix. And
Yep.
there's so many of those patterns that are just so ingrained in us that we're not going to recognize. And that's why it's so good to have someone and courses like yours. What I love about your course too is the community. It's it's a lot of sensitive people like myself,
Yeah.
and really getting to hear what they're going through is a way. Community works is really cool because it's like you get more. I don't know. You can just listen, and that can be therapy for the day, if you will. Especially in the beginning, when we don't have a lot of capacity. Turn that video off and just listen, and so many other people can speak to what we can identify and resonate with what's going on. The one thing you said though too, they like it makes sense because I remember a story from me. You're talking about the sounds are over here and the thoughts and the feelings and the smells. And when I was in with Irene and Seth in Canada, I did they pulled we called it a Mack truck out of my nervous system. It was quite the experience. And afterwards, so I had a bad fall when I was in Germany traveling abroad. I was drunk and I smelled IPAs on Seth afterwards.
Yeah.
Seth, like, I'm remembering that because I'm very not disoriented after the session, and I go to give Seth a hug, and I'm like, dude, you smell like IPAs,
Yes.
you know. And the next day, we reflected on that because it was like, hey, do you remember what you said yesterday? And this is kind of cool too. I fell out of a second story window during that experience, not with Seth, but that the next day when I woke up, my neck was hurting so bad from my neck all the way down to my spine. So that stuff was working its way out, and it's so cool how trauma can work it out. There's so many different avenues, and when we build capacity in these doorways, it can kind of happen at any time because now we have more space, and it's like that's why I think building capacity is such a big thing. Um, because it's like that swimming pool analogy, it gets bigger and those things find a way out on their own instead of us trying to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love so much of what you said there from like the smell, and like, yeah, how that comes up and then the next day to wake up with that body pain and so much of the time people who are sensitized, they wake up and they're like, "Oh my God, it's gotten worse," or "Oh my God, I've got a new symptom," or "This is terrible." And then it's like, I'm going to turn to become obsessed with this now and try to fix this. And, this journey is so much it's about going from this like hyper individualized perfectionism, I have to figure it out and do it and heal it, to this like, can I trust that this too is part of the process and it's just moving its way out of my body? And if I don't turn to this pain and obsess about it and try to make it leave, if I actually just like let go and trust, like, oh, my body is still moving something out and I can trust it, like it's on my side. We're in relationship with our body and with our nervous system. And, at the heart of this work for so many of us is broken attachment systems. And what this work does, in this mysterious kind of magical way is it kind of forces us to come to terms with that and begin to find trust and connection again with our body. And we get out of chronic illness and chronic anxiety loops actually by doing less, by trusting life, by building community and relationships, and actually by healing that deep internal wounding, by beginning to be like, yeah, I feel the chair underneath me. Oh, I can trust my body's doing something for me, not against me. Let me give it a few weeks and see what happens.
Mm,
And all of that begins to change us so radically. And we come out, regulated, trusting people who don't feel like we're doing it all ourselves.
mm, yeah, it's amazing. It's like what is safety, and safety comes down to self trust and in learning to believe that no matter what happens, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And sensitization is the opposite. It's like something's wrong with me and I gotta fix it. And if I don't, I'm gonna die. Does that pretty much get it?
That's exactly right, and you can even hear it in the words that you said, and I'm, like, exactly on the same page with you. Those are the words of, like, a young, unsupported child, right? Which is, like, in some ways, whether it was totally true or not, my little brain believed in peak moments of scary things in my house or whatever, like, I'm all alone and I'm gonna die, so I better And then my brain is like, okay, well, here's all this adrenaline. And so let me try to figure this out or fix this or think that there's some sort of magical thing I can do to make this person stop drinking or whatever, and like start fawning or, whatever those things are. And yeah, that was part of just what happened back then. But now life is inviting me into a different type of alignment where I don't need to avoid things, where I don't need to not eat for the day to avoid toxins and what's going to hurt my stomach or smells or metals or whatever. And I still am someone who chooses to buy organic food and live a healthy lifestyle, but I don't buy into this idea that everything is harming me because I'm not in the nervous system state anymore where I'm not seeing through the lens of a world that tries to punish and harm me. I see through the lens of a supportive, loving world. And so that's what I feel and that's what I see in others.
Hey man, that's beautiful. And as you were describing, the early stuff and feeling unsafe, I also think about environmental safety. I don't remember where I got that term from. I think it's from the CPTSD book, NARM, a NARM book.
Mm.
But environmental failure is so interesting how, as a kid, it's unsafe. What do we need? We need unconditional love. We need
Yeah.
safety. We need individuality. If we don't have one of those things, it's not good for our development. And so you could say the environment has failed us. We didn't get what we needed from it, even if we're not overtly abused and have it could be being misattuned, like not getting what we needed, not being met in our emotion. And what's interesting with that too is what we tend to do because we don't have the capacity or the thought to be able to look at our environment and say you failed me. We turn it on ourselves because that would really disrupt things to look at our parents and say, hey, I'm not getting what I need, for a child to be able to say that. And so we turn on ourselves and we become, that's where all that anger and shame and I got to do this alone and I got to be perfect and I got to fix it. And it's just so interesting to see how we tend to treat ourselves the way we were treated until the perfect storm happens and we get to we get the opportunity to look at these things, revisit them.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, for me, when I teach the Befriending Fear course, it's like the first part is all about sensitization. The second part is about like avoidance and incremental training and exposure therapy and how we start to, get out in the world a bit more and build capacity. And then really this end part is these questions about like the relational aspect of what are we playing out in our body that is really our unfinished business of our early family life and sometimes also like our ancestry.
Okay.
What's been repeating again and again in our families and how am I playing that out with my sore back, right? It's like if my sore back makes me feel like victimized by life and I feel angry at it, or if I have chronic fatigue and there's this exhausted part of me and then I hate that exhausted part, it's like, yeah, what does that remind me of growing up? Did I have a mom who was like exhausted in bed all the time and did I hate her for it? And like what is, relationally, I find there's so much interplay in our symptoms. And when only once we have the capacity, so first sensitization, growing capacity, getting some of our life back, but then we can start to ask these deeper questions of like, wait, what is going on here? And how can I begin to like notice this and also just allow it to let go?
That's a perfect transition because I know you've done so many courses, right? Just like I have. Like, once I got into befriending fear, it's like just the name of that called my name for quite a while, and once I got in, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, she's done smart body, smart mind. She's done somatic experiencing. She's done DNRS. She's the queen of symptoms and or emotions. I feel like, and one thing I heard you say that I really want to highlight is, with everything that you've been through, someone who's sensitized who's sitting in the fire, who's got the anxiety of a 1,000 on a
Yeah.
scale of 1 to 10, who sleeps 30 minutes. You think that we would just constantly be trying to calm you down, right? And I tend to make fun of this, or I'm trying to figure out how to do it in my content without being rude because there is its place. But it's like making fun of these soothing tactics, right? And it's like if you look on social media, nervous system work looks like rubbing your face and like doing fascia squeezing really hard, maybe doing breath work until you pat it. I had a breath work instructor tell me to go ahead and pass out, or whatever. And so those of us that are type A that are willing to do anything,
Yeah.
we may spend all day long soothing ourselves. And I think what you said was it really, for soothing yourself, really made things worse.
Mhm.
And what really helped was going towards the symptoms. And that's why I love your handle on Instagram, moving towards. It makes so much sense. Like, so help us understand that because it feels kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. What I found at the heart of so much of chronic illness and complex trauma is really like the anxiety, OCD kind of anxiety compulsion loop. And it's like we feel something and then we get filled with adrenaline and then we try to look for something to make us feel different.
Mm,
And when we do that over and over again, we reinforce the idea that feeling this anxiety surge or sympathetic charge in our system is dangerous. And it reinforces this loop that keeps repeating, which leads us to like self soothing all day long and avoidance. So it's both like compulsions and then avoiding anything that is going to bring up anxiety in the system because another part of this, just briefly, is often because of neuroplasticity, what also happens is when we get washed with adrenaline or we're really sensitized, it's also becomes connected to all these symptoms. So if I get a kick of sympathetic energy, and I have associations in my brain that connect that to my POTS symptoms and my chronic pain, or passing out, or having an intrusive thought, then just because of neuroplasticity, when I get adrenaline, all of those parts of my brain are going to fire and they're going to be active and they're going to be happening in my system. And this is just neuroplasticity. It doesn't mean anything's getting worse. It doesn't mean anything horrible is happening. It's just how our brain works.
it's like the
So,
pre-rehearsed way of doing things that our brain has learned. When this happens, we shut down and don't
yeah,
sleep and
exactly.
feel like we're on fire.
That's right. We just do this. It's a memory and it repeats the memory again and again because our mind and our brain is just like it's the original AI. It just takes the past and projects it into the future and repeats it unless we interrupt the pattern and choose something new or give new information.
Mm,
Well, part of this work, which is hard, is we kind of have to defy gravity a bit and say, like, okay, I've been through this for a year now. I've been to every doctor. Of course, all of us get checked out a bajillion times first. Once we know that, then eventually it's like, yeah, you know what? All these symptoms can come up, and there's the drive to self-soothe. And actually, this time I'm not going to. And I'm just gonna, sit with these symptoms and I might like relax and I might yawn and I might resource myself to be able to stay with the sensation, but I'm not going to self-soothe to get rid of the sensation. So that's the big difference. And when I do that, I teach my brain that having a sympathetic spike is not dangerous. And then if I do that, 10 times, then the next time it happens, I'm actually going to start to it's going to remember, oh, when Simona gets this, she actually relaxes. And so then this new neuroplasticity happens where, oh, I don't need to send off these signals. Simona doesn't respond to those, so we can deprioritize that. They have nothing to do with safety anymore. And actually, we can start to ride it out in a new way.
mm.
And it sounds easy coming out of my mouth. When I first did it and with through exposure, it was scary and it was hard. And I did go into depersonalization. And I did go into having, panic attacks sometimes. And I know how hard that is, and I don't want to oversimplify it. And I had to be willing for all of that to be here and to just not believe it to eventually come out of it. And it was a many month practice of doing that. But I remember one time I started to have a panic attack and I was like, okay, wait, wait. And I got on the couch and I put my hands behind my head and yawned. And I was like, all right, take me away. Like I'm ready to die.
Now's the perfect time to have a panic attack, is what I'll tell my body. Like, thank God, how can we cheer it on instead of running away from it?
Yeah, I was like, I want to relax. And then for me, it almost became devotional. It's like, I don't want to miss a second of this. And like, let me feel my heart. Let me feel my breath. Let me feel my fear. Let me feel my numb legs. Let me hear that thought that shows me an image of me, dying on the way to the hospital. Like, let me watch the whole thing and like how this crazy, beautiful system works. And let me take a breath and just like love myself and let this happen.
Gosh, imagine that. I'm going to bring this analogy in, but I was telling Irene, like, off the record the other day, like, we were done, and I said, trauma work is kind of like having this normal body, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're covered in dog poo or something like that, right? And you're like, oh my God, this dog poo is, and you scrub it and you scrub it, and everything that you've ever learned to clean yourself doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
you literally have to learn to be okay with it. And eventually you got to learn to love it. And then when you learn to love it and be okay with it, sometimes it just falls apart, it falls off.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive. You
Yeah.
literally are staring it in the face, and everything in your body wants to do the habitual, automatic thing that that has kept you safe
Yeah.
your whole life. And you're going, I'm going to sit here. So it's
Yeah.
not like, what's the difference between fake it till you make it and allowing that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. For me, because part of what's coming up in the sympathetic charge is trauma and is a feeling of aloneness, it makes perfect sense for us to think that the right thing to do is to try to fix it and try to like stop it and try to save ourselves from it. And it's really tender because often that's actually what we wished happened in our childhood, that
Yeah.
someone came in, picked us up, made all the bad feelings stop, and like, ran us away from it. And this is really hard and it's sensitive and it's entangled, with attachment and all of these things, but really and sometimes we feel like we're abandoning ourselves or gaslighting ourselves when we don't respond.
Mm-hmm.
But the real truth and like the real love and the real secure attachment actually comes from this place of anything can happen in here, and I'm going to stand with myself with an open heart and love, and I'm not leaving. And that I'm not taking it to fix and I'm not running away from it. It's actually like life is hard. This is happening and I'm going to be right here with it and I'm going to watch the storm come and go and I'm going to hold myself and be here, but I'm not I'm going to let it happen and I'm going to grow from it and I'm going to become actually more resilient from that. And so that's like this tiny little switch of like we're not like white knuckling it. We're really, for me there's like a deep call to love in it
Yeah.
and a deep secure attachment that's like actually can't run away from this. Life is painful. Life is full of trauma. Forever, we were born and we die, and people are born and they die, and bad things happen. And actually, what we need is a steady presence that can be like, life is a shitstorm, and I'm right here with myself, and I'm never leaving myself, and I can handle it.
That I appreciate you sharing that so much, because that script has, I got that from Befriending Fear, and it's helped so much. um It sounds like what you're describing, this brain retraining, this is the accepting, allowing. It's kind of like the rain. It's recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. These are things that we can do at home, and that's more of a top-down approach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then somatic of, feel your butt in the chair, notice your breath, look around, orient. These are more bottom up,
Yep.
and I feel like there's kind of a war between the top downs and the bottoms ups. And I'm curious what you would say about that. And for someone that is sensitized, where would you have them start? I know everybody's different. We cannot, but like
Yeah. No,
a
it's a great.
general idea.
Yeah, it's a perfect question. And the truth is in my experience, we need both. They're critical. When I think of somatic experiencing, which I love, and some of the videos they show of like the animal and the animal like shaking it off. And it's like, yeah, that there's some big truth in that in terms of our primal nature to move things through the nervous system. But what is different about humans is we make beliefs and we
Mm,
give meaning to things. So for an example on me, it's like, yeah, something like I could be really surprised by my mom doing something that feels traumatic or seeing her in something sad. So like, yeah, that sensation is here. But what's also here is the meaning I made out of that, which is my mom doesn't love me. My
mm,
mom doesn't care about me. And I'm actually not going to fully, in my case, I'm not going to fully get better by just doing bottom up exercises with the sensation of the trauma of seeing really scary things. I actually need to go in and like sometimes question those thoughts and look back at those beliefs and is it really true that she didn't love me or, is she was she just, in the situation and so for me like and then I also on the top down way, I need to understand my mind because if I don't understand my mind, then I'm going to get stuck again and again with making meaning out of these sensations.
mm.
So it's inseparable for me, the work. But what I always start people with is education. What is happening in my body? And let me help you understand why it's not dangerous. And then
Yes.
I'm going to teach you how to be with it somatically. And then after we can be with sensation, in that part, I'm going to invite you to not go into your thoughts but then once you can be with sensation, I'm actually going to invite the thoughts back because they're going to give us good information about the meaning that you've made about these things that's stuck in your body relationally. We're going to untangle that. So that's the kind of the 3-step process that befriending fear walks people through. And that's the order. And it really forever, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. And I think that's why I love like the learning to, so I just wrote down. Well, first is education, so that you can start to see these things. Because once you can see it, you don't have to be it. Doesn't mean it changes. I think you can learn, and then eventually you will embody when you've done the reps. You've seen it happen enough times, like, oh, this thing is not that scary. So now if I have education and I can be with the sensation a little bit more, I can build my capacity. So now the sensation can come and go, and now I'm relaxing into it, and the body's going like, oh, he's doing something different. So that habitual pathway is being interrupted. We're creating a neuroplastic environment. And so now we can go now because of neuroplasticity, capacity, education, a little bit of embodiment and experience, we can really start to go in and question these things and work with some of these parts. And now, instead of like your experience with the plant medicine, we're not getting fully absorbed into the experience. Like I remember going into a part and feeling how big this grief was, but it's like for the first time because I had the capacity, I kind of caught it. Like this, and I'm like, usually it would just be me. I am the grief, I am the fear, I am the terror. But I was like, oh my God. And I think we talked about this before, maybe. But it was like a psychedelic experience. All the way I know how to describe it because all at once in this moment, I'm holding this part of me. I'm getting visuals from it. I can feel how much emotion and rawness is there. I also in my adult self back here having this experience, watching all of this, and laughing hysterically at what I just did, that I separated from it, that created some space. And that with that space, we get to decide, we create a new relationship, a new association. And it's like that part's not running the show anymore, and it integrates into our adult consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's just rinse, wash, repeat.
Yep.
Learn to follow what feels good for you and give yourself permission, because your nervous system is the map. Like
Yes.
we could sit here and do like a 1 through 5 all day long. And depending on the person, that could get thrown upside down every way from Sunday. And, I think it's the people that I love. I still kind of feel like a baby in this work. I'll probably say that for the rest of my life, but I've been doing this for like 4 years, 3, 4 years. And the people that are really good, they've gotten their ass handed to them. They've learned from multiple modalities and mentors. You and I could probably sit here and have a pissing contest about who's done the most courses, right? And we probably taken a little bit from all of that. And
Yeah.
what that allows for is intuition in the moment of following and meeting the moment versus like, oh, here's step one. Now we've completed step 1A. Now let's go to 1B, because that is not how life works. And if we can trust and allow that I'm that and get out of our heads and allow our body to and our nervous system to guide, then we can be our own medicine. And we need another healthy nervous system to model that along the way, I think.
Amen. Yeah. Like couldn't agree more with all of it. It's a spiral. It's like weaves in and out. And eventually when we actually stop trying to get to a destination, we get to start to enjoy the spiral and enjoy like the fascination of like, whoa, like a human nervous system is wild and this body is wild and what we're going through is fascinating and as we get a more fluid responsive nervous system, exactly as you said, it takes us, we have to be willing, again, it's that cycle of life and death. It's like, oh, I learned this structure, this was perfect, and now I have to let it go. And now I'm learning this structure and I actually have to let that go. And what I thought was 100% right at this part of my journey, actually that's being composted and it's growing these flowers and they're bringing me to the next step. And the way shows the way, shows the way. And our job is to like make choices, of course, but also to just follow. And like the nervous system is this incredible intelligence. And getting our asses handed to us opens this humility, I think. And it's like, oh, I'm kind of like a fool for love, for life, for the nervous system now. It's like, oh, I'm gonna follow this devotion that I have. And it's led me to more like pleasure in my body, more love in my life. Another time we'll talk about the dance and by rhythms and moving things through our body through movement and but all of that has come into my life through this work and it was hell and that dark night or being in the womb or being in that abandoned empty space birthed so much richness that both of us have such an inclination to share with the world and that really touches me.
You know, there's two things. I'm taking two different sentences that you said about your journey. I'm kind of putting them together, and it's just so interesting that it was hell and it was perfect,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like both of those are true,
Mhm.
and like before, I imagine it was black or white, right? And so we got to grieve that, but we learn that failure is just more information, and that the way we got here is perfect. And like when you're in it, whoever's in it right now, and they're saying, fuck that. I hear you, you listen, and keep going. I think we've I love that you shared your journey of we said of getting your ass handed to you and coming out the other side. That's certainly what's attracted me to your work. You have incredible programs and communities that you're creating that are working with people that are just like us, sensitize all the symptoms. They're the underdogs that aren't ready to give up. And I think the befriending fear course, befriending ourselves. There's so many modalities in this course, and there's so much to learn. There's also the community aspect and what it means to be in an energy in a field of people showing up and wanting to heal. I think that what is that like? It's like quantum, and it exponentially increases possibilities, and things can happen with you just being in that environment, and even with just learning. And so I want to encourage everyone to take check out Simona, check out her Instagram page, um, moving towards appropriately named, and the course is the Gathering Stream. All the amazing courses are underneath that. The one thing we didn't get to talk about too was the embodied movement. So maybe we can chat about that next time. And you also do one-on-one work. I'm going to be doing a one-on-one session with you later this week. So I guess thank you so much for sharing this very vulnerable story and sharing your story of pain to purpose and all the amazing things that you create for people that are sensitive like us and want some help. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so great to be here with you, and I love what you're doing, and I love what you're bringing. And this is like, just like you said, for the people who are just deep in it, who are in that kind of hell realm of symptoms and rumination and thoughts and images and fixing and stuff. It's so important for them to know that people have been there and that there is a way through, and the way through is really like with ourselves, with community, with each other. And this is, for me, it's like this is the healing movement that's sweeping the planet, which is, we need each other, and we need each other in this work, and we need to find our resilience and our courage without avoidance and without running away. And we all need to grow our capacity. And this seems to be what the world is asking. And so it's an honor to be part of responding to that call.
Mm. And as you're describing all that, I'm thinking of like if this is you, like be the buffalo. I think the buffalo is the only animal that turns towards the storm and walks through it, knowing that that's the quickest way through. I think everybody else is doing the Amazon Prime, the quick fixes, the detoxes, the supplements, the fixing. And when when you've done all that and you're ready to move towards it, to move towards the storm, like be the buffalo, like yeah, Moon got a fantastic community for you. Nah.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming on. I'll put all the links to your website, your social media, and your community under. If anybody has any comments or questions, we love that. And Simona, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Sounds good.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.